Resolving the differences between reality and the ghost myth is particularly challenging. The main reason for this is that ghosts and spirits, etc., are usually considered objects of faith, which imbues them with properties that are not necessarily grounded in reality, particularly considering the properties such an entity possesses. However, there is still room to speculate as to the nature of ghosts as they relate to the real world, and perhaps reconcile their nature with that which is possible. Western science and medicine is often criticized for being myopic in its almost exclusively reductionist approach to objects of knowledge. This, in turn, leads to gaps in our ability to explain phenomena, such as the seemingly irrational world of atoms giving rise to the rational world we live in. This most famous conundrum led to the development of special and general relativity. Although we understand that difference of scale might bring about this variation, we don't often acknowledge that this might also apply to larger objects in the world, such as the brain. The brain is often considered the seat of consciousness, the home of what essentially makes us who we are. From this organ arises our thoughts and emotions, and yet, despite understanding how such a thing functions on a basic level, we nevertheless struggle to explain its more transcendent properties, namely its ability to produce the mind. Though how might the brain create something so utterly alien to our present understanding of physics? Often, the brain's ability to render the mind is ascribed to its similarity to computational devices, since the brain is a network of structures that very closely resembles hyper-threaded NAND gates and transistors. Indeed, much of the terminology invented for discussing the function of computers is eminently transferable to the brain. However, the problem with this analogy is that modern computers show no signs of the autonomous activity that is usually associated with the mind. Simply supplying energy to a microprocessor does not make it perform computational operations, whereas a brain does so regardless. And as a result, computers are presently incapable of producing a mind and spirit. So we must look elsewhere and invoke hypothetical concepts to explain how the mind, and consequently ghosts, might potentially be created. Metamaterials are a relatively recent development, and possess properties that, when translated to the brain, may explain the creation and formation of ghosts and spirits. Simply put, metamaterials consist of nanostructures placed in composite arrays. The resulting structure is capable of influencing various forms of wave, such as light and sound, despite the fact that the structures themselves are smaller than the waves they are influencing, and thus should not be able to interact with the waves at all. Considering the complicated structure of the brain, it might not be unreasonable to suggest that its structure is interacting with some all-encompassing ether, and thus produce what we experience as the mind. Ghosts would then be born from a semi-permanent impression left on this ether, or perhaps the brain is simply capable of generating this ether, leaving residue in the form of a ghost. The implications of these concepts would mean that even the still living are capable of producing ghosts, should they for some reason leave an impression on the ether or leave some particularly strong residue. Of course, with any kind of inquiry into the physical world, we want to avoid creating new and radical forms of matter, such as the aforementioned mind ether, and it goes without saying that imaginative speculation could hardly get more fanciful than this. Ultimately, the complexity of this subject, and the various factors believed to be involved, means that this endeavor is far beyond the might of a simple video. And as such, we would very much like to hear your own ideas, dear viewer, of how ghosts may function and come to be. Though we may never understand the nature of the human soul, we can be certain that it is nevertheless an important and vital aspect of our beliefs and our cultures.